for this one, I copied the range of motion from the book, so it's filled in already, because I see different things. So, okay. Thumb CMC flexion. So looking at, so we know that this is our first CMC joint, right? So CMC flexion is this motion here. Okay, so we see the angle that we're gonna measure is here to here. So our axis, we're gonna use this goniometer.
Half moon.
Half moon. And then I need to position the wrist. So this is our 0 point, is this way. So I need to get it so that way that I can start with the axis kind of on top like this. Is everybody good?
Yes, it's on the
CMC.
Yeah. So I kind of have to position so that way that the radius and that first metacarpal are in line. So first I got to get that going in place. Okay. Then I take my half moon. This goes on top. The axis is over the CMC joint. The stationary arm kind of is going to go diagonal with the forearm, kind of just in line with the plane of the thumb. And then the movable arm though is following that first metacarpal. So you're gonna kind of set it up so that you have this 0 point. Keep this one stationary. Then you ask them to please bring your thumb down like that. And it goes that way. So you have about, what, 10 degrees of motion? A normal 0 to 15 for the
so it
book.
follows the shaft.
Follows the metacarpal, the first metacarpal. So this is kind of,
We're doing
yeah.
AROM, PROM, AROM.
I have to look at the practical. You're right. Does anybody have the practical exam printed out?
Nadine probably does.
I'm sorry, what?
Nadine, do you have the practical exam printed out?
I'm sorry, what?
The practical exam printed out?
I think so. Yeah, I do. Got it.
I do what I can.
Wouldn't it be in the
It's not on there.
It doesn't say anything.
Well, John's here. I can ask him.
AROM, PROM,
AROM?
AROM, PROM, and then measure. So, have them touch down. Good. Active range. Then you're gonna, again, align. Passively do it. And then you're gonna have them do that one more time. Axis on the CMC joint. Stationary arm kind of going diagonal on the plane of the thumb. And then movable arm will follow that MCP. Sometimes if you have to too, so to get it to that 0, you can allow it to hang over so that she can move. Go ahead. So yeah, I still got, now I got 15. Since we cleared. If you, so I was here and I feel like the table was blocking, so then I just moved right here. So yeah, you can.
Okay.
If you notice something like that. That's part of the positioning.
Does it matter which position my wrist is in?
It does, you have to just position it so that it's 0. Because if it's, even if it's in neutral,
Well, how about for lateral and medial deviation?
just so that this is flat. So it probably might be a little bit ulnarly deviated, but you need this to be here.
Okay.
So however their wrist to position to get this flat.
Because you said you wanted
So that might be probably a little.
Yeah.
the radius and the MC are in place. Or in
Yeah, so that you obtain this like starting position, this is the 0. So you have to have it, yeah, flat here.
so it's straight here.
So probably a little ulnar deviation and a little bit of extension. So that way that you can have this flat and kind of in line with the radius. Extension. CMC extension. So extension is out this way. This is thumb extension. The way that the book does it is the axis is the CMC joint. So you'd have them do it, relax, you do it passively, and then have them do it again. Take the active range. Axis is on the CMC joint. Stationary arm follows the shaft of the radius or the forearm. And then the movable arm follows again that first metacarpal. You have 50 degrees. Normal is 0 to 50. So, and again, this is with the half. Did you get it? Palmar abduction. This way. Do you guys have the book? Do they do it from the radius or do they do it from the second metacarpal? I think it's from the radius again.
Do you want me to take a look?
Which book?
The cram session. So this is the motion for abduction. So you have flexion, extension, abduction is away from the palm. Now there's two ways to do it. I do it from the stationary arm with the second metacarpal. Either way, the axis is on the CMC joint. The movable arm follows that first metacarpal still.
One extension?
Abduction. If they do it from the radius, is the stationary arm. So they do it
Stationary.
from the second.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they do it the way that I do it. Some books still follow the radius again. So for abduction, the axis goes on the CMC joint. Stationary arm follows the second metacarpal. Movable arm follows the first metacarpal. So you're kind of making this angle. So Katie has 45 degrees and normal per the book is 0 to 60.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Stationary, so the axis is on the CMC joint. Stationary arm is the second metacarpal. Movable arm is the first metacarpal. And it's basically making like this picture, like that way. So first, here's the joint, stationary arm.
You're starting.
Yeah, this would be 0. So for that one, to check for the 0, you have to see if they can adduct and bring it out. And then do it, yep, like that. That's full range. Then here to here. Because you might start, and then I just take the end range motion. Because when they start, if you technically line it up this way, yeah, it's gonna be not, you know, fully at 0. So full 0 is like adducted on top of each other, and then out, and then you do it passively, and then have them bring it out again. So you just check, yeah, for that 0, and then just have them hold this position and place your goniometer.
I'm sorry, did you want them to start at 0?
Yeah, you have to check for the 0.
Okay.
Sorry for us to mention that.
No, it's okay.
Because if they're here, it's already at an angle. So
Yeah.
check for the 0, kind of stacked on top like that. That's
Right,
0.
And then you'll have them do that actively, and then you'll do it, and then you'll measure, and then
And then to measure it, so I don't follow it like through the range, I have them assume it, and then I
you don't
and then I
follow it
place
through the
it.
range. They just do it, and then you'll place your goniometer on top.
Yeah. Oh, I have it up here. Palmar abduction, thumb MCP flexion. So this is the MCP joint of your thumb. So your axis is the MCP joint. Now for a lot of these, yeah, moving forward, they mostly flex and extend, right? So it gets pretty.
What do you call that?
This one?
Finger?
finger goniometer. This is the half moon, this is the finger. So we're gonna switch to the finger. For the MCP and the IP. Yeah, actually, all of them except MCP abduction. So, the only other one that uses the half moon is the MCP abduction. So for the CMC joint of the thumb and the MCP abduction. So we're doing thumb MCP flexion. So that's this movement here. So I'll block, that's the active, good. Then when you're doing passive, again, you don't want to cross the joints. You want to isolate to here. And you're just gonna kind of move them through. So I'm grabbing first metacarpal, grabbing proximal phalanx, stretching through. Okay. Then I'm gonna have them bend that again for me. Good. And she can stay there. Now, the stationary arm on this one is the one that has the protractors, usually the stationary arm. And this guy's your little movable arm. So your axis is the MCP joint. And this is your axis, is where that bend is on this goniometer. So your stationary arm goes with the first metacarpal. The movable arm goes with the proximal phalanx. And then you take your range. Good. Check it. Now I have to find my 0 because there's going to be on either side. And she has 30, 40, 55 degrees, and normal is 0 to 50.
Can you repeat the proximal or the stationary and arm?
So for a lot of these too, so it's metacarpal phalangeal joint, right? So the axis is the joint, then the stationary arm is the metacarpal, and then the movable arm is the phalanx. So MCP joint, MCP. So stationary is the MC, and then movable is the phalanx, the proximal phalanx. So you could just think the axis is the joint, then if you know the joint name, the proximal part and the distal part of the joint. So then the same thing for IP joint flexion. So she's gonna straighten it all the way. Good, and then you're gonna bend it, but I'm blocking the rest of it. So that's the active range. Then passively, the same thing, we don't wanna cross joints. So you're gonna hold that proximal phalanx, hold that distal phalanx, and you're gonna stretch it this way. Okay, move it through the passive range. And then you're gonna have her do it again. Bend it this way. Good. Bend it and hold for me. Then your axis goes on the IP joint. The stationary arm is the proximal phalanx. The movable arm is the distal phalanx. So what's a little bit different here though, that you might have to line it up on the side, is that if you look at people's thumbnails, or even more so than at the fingers, it kind of curves in this shape, right? So if you're trying to lay it on top like that, sometimes the measurement isn't accurate, so I place it kind of over to the side. The book might not do it, but so Katie, you notices, has that. So my stationary arm goes on the proximal, my axis on the joint, and I'm gonna get it like kind of sighting below the nail. But it's the distal phalanx. So I'm here, good. And that's her movement. So I'm putting that at 0 to 85, and normal is 0 to 90.
How do you know if this one starts at, like, is it 0?
Yeah, it is. If you look at, you're a little hyper. So if you look, here's the bone and the bone. Yours is probably
So do you have
plus
to
like
mention what the, do you have to like measure that to mention what I start at, because it's a range?
I don't do it for this one
Okay.
because it's more of like an accessory for the elbow. I think it's important.
Okay.
But you can. This one doesn't go
Right.
backwards.
So you don't have to measure to see if they actually start at 0.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless it's lacking, then an extension lag would be like minus, and you see that more. If it's extensive, like a hitchhiker's thumb deformity, I would note something like that, or maybe take my half moon, but it's not something usually that I work on. So like, I'm not gonna fix that. And it's not, yeah, a sign of, unless it's excessive, then I would note it in the form of probably hitchhiker deformity. Might be differing opinions on that too. That's what I do. But for the purpose of this, no. I would just make sure that it has 0 because it's difficult. This one doesn't go into hyper. Opposition. So opposition is a little bit different. So full range of motion from opposition is to come from extension and then touch the 5th digit. So that's full range of motion. So for the purpose of the practical, yes, I want you to come from here and touch your pinky finger, and that's good. But then for the purpose of the practical too, what if they couldn't do that? How do you measure it? So there's 2 ways to measure it. You can measure either that they can go to the 4th digit, 3rd digit, 2nd digit, whatever digit that they can oppose to. You would then say they have opposition to the 3rd, but they can't make it to the 5th. You could say that. Or where's that half moon again?
Right here. Oh, it fell off too.
Oh, thank you. So they have these little centimeters, right? A lot of your half moon or even the other goniometers have these centimeters. You can measure from the middle of the tip of the thumb to the middle of the tip of the pinky and say that they are 2 centimeters from being able to achieve opposition. You would just document like what your landmark is. Some people do this middle part of the nail to the middle part of the nail. I do the middle of the pulp to the middle of the tip, like that. And you would measure it in the centimeters, how far. So just kind of pick one of those, like have them do the full range and then tell me how you would measure it if they didn't have full range. All right, MCP flexion. So she can come up this way. So whichever finger that you're doing, which I think on the practical we specify like 3rd digit or whichever digit we want, this is your 0. So you're gonna make sure that they can do 0 and then they're gonna come this way. Good. And then so that would be your active. If you're doing passive, again, I'm gonna, like the concept is to not cross joints. So I have my proximal phalanx, my metacarpal, and I'm just gonna passively put them through.
And does it matter if the more distal joints are bending or not?
Not really.
I feel like you can get more flexion
With the full, I don't find. Do you find?
Like when I do this motion, I want to do that too.
You could do that too. You want to make a fist? It's fine. Okay. So either this way, you can make a fist. I don't think it impacts too much, unless there's tightness. If there's extrinsic tightness, then yeah. Like if your extensor digitorum is tight,
Then it'd be hard to do that.
then you'd be hard to do that. But if it's like most of us should be normal, so play around. But you could test it this way or however. But passive range, always just isolate to that joint. Okay, so you're holding metacarpal, holding proximal phalanx, going this way. And then when they actively do it again, go ahead. Or you can touch your palm. Okay. So then the axis goes over the MCP joint. The stationary arm follows the metacarpal, and the movable arm follows the proximal phalanx.
Does it no matter which joint you pick and which MCP joint you pick?
No. So I'm gonna be about. So you do. Sometimes in the eval you have to.
For the practical purpose.
They'll tell you with like just 1 digit.
Okay.
And then you take the range. She's 0 to 90. Okay. MCP abduction. So again, it'll tell you which digit. So abduction is away from the middle finger. So let's do the pinky for demonstration. So actively would be to spread your fingers, good, and bring it back in. Okay. And then passively again, so we're getting into that habit of holding MCP and the proximal phalanx, and we'll pull it out to the side. So then that's the passive range, and then do it again for me. Good. and then go ahead and keep your hand there. So the axis is the MCP joint, stationary arm is the metacarpal, movable arm. And again too, see how sometimes people's fingers, they can have ulnar deviation. Follow that proximal phalanx, ignore the rest of it, because their finger could go whatever way, but you're isolating, you're focusing on that joint. So she says she's about 35 degrees, normal 0 to 20. And the same thing,
Where's
she
the
writes it
stationary
here.
arm?
Metacarpal. So for all of them, just think about the metacarpal phalangeal joint. So the MCP joint is the axis, the metacarpal part of it is the stationary, the phalangeal part of it is the movable. So just citing those just at the joint.
Wait, Corey, sorry, when you do the abduction, when she's starting this really hard, all of her fingers going, just measure.
She could do just like, but it's hard to isolate.
I just did the pinky, which
Exactly,
seems
yeah.
fine.
Pinky's fine. If it's this one, if it happens to be like the middle or the fourth, follow. Or instructions, sometimes it's just easier to get the patient to be like, open. Okay. PIP flexion. So for this one, come up here. Can you go like this? Good. So this is PIP, this is DIP, right? So this is the position for that I usually measure DIP flexion in. You could do a fist or like this way, I think it's easier. PIP flexion, that would be your active range. Then passively again is holding on to the proximal, holding on to the middle phalanx, and coming from extension to flexion. That's how you would do here. Then go ahead and do this position one more time. Good. So then the axis, again, it's the proximal interphalangeal joint. So the axis is the joint, the PIP joint. Proximal phalanx is the stationary arm. Movable, middle phalanx is the movable arm. So I come here, you have about 105 degrees, maybe probably 115 when I say the geo. And normal is 0 to 120. Then again, this position would be for DIP joint flexion. So I see that I test her, I say, come put your fingers all the way straight for me. So then I would just make sure if I was in the clinic that she gets to 0, because some people might have a lag. So then I would document if there was a lag or not, okay? Then she comes back into here, that's DIP flexion. When I'm testing it passively, I'm holding the middle phalanx and I'm just gonna bend just that distal phalanx. Sometimes the nail is sensitive, so I hold it on the side, but not like when they press on the nail. And then I have her come back up here. So for measuring the DIP joint, the axis is on the DIP joint, stationary arm on the middle phalanx, movable arm on the proximal phalanx, and this might be 1, 2, but her nail's pretty flat, so I'm gonna leave it. And she has about 0 to 80, and normal 0 to 80.
Would you do the same thing where, like, it might go to the side instead of on top to make sure?
Yeah, if it's relevant. Hers are pretty flat though, but yeah.
Only for, that would be for the DIP, not for the IP? Okay.
Unless there's like swelling or like scar tissue on top, that's when it impacted, then sometimes I'll do it on the side. Like with my extensor tendon like repairs, sometimes the scar tissue is so bulky that I do it.
But usually we're just gonna do it on the top. Okay.
Corey, where's the axis and stationary arm again for that one?
For this one?
Yeah.
So the axis is on the joint, the IP joint.
IP joint?
The DIP, yeah. And then the stationary arm is like the bone that's proximal to the joint, so the middle phalanx, the
Okay.
movable arms, the bone that's distal to the joint, the distal phalanx.
Distal, okay.